so many onions. Hi there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Regina, and in today's video we are harvesting onions. Yes, onions. Y'all, it has been 7 months. My onions video, when I planted them from seed back in November, that was one of my first videos, and I think to date it's the one that's gotten the most views, so I guess the internet is as obsessed with onions, growing onions from seed, as I am. Well, now it is time to harvest them. 7 months. Maybe that's why I'm so obsessed, because it takes so long. And if you get it wrong, it's hard to recover. But yes, the time has come. Most of my onions in my onion bed have fallen over, and also the ones that I put in my strawberry bed as well. So it is time to get them out of the ground and see if I accomplish my goal of growing a year's worth of onions. Y'all, can y'all see this? Can y'all see this excitement? I'm so excited for these onions, y'all. But before we get into it, if you enjoy this video, as soon as you get to the point where you're smiling or you're excited or you're ready to grow your own onions, click that like button. That helps this video get out to more gardeners, and of course it lets me know that you liked it. Also, if you are looking for more gardening content, I'm growing in North Texas, Zone 8A. So definitely if you're growing in that region, but also if you're growing in other regions, I'm sure some of the tips and content I share are going to be helpful to you too. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel and click that bell notification so that you never miss an update. Okay, so these onions planted back in, I want to say early to mid-November. I have a whole onions playlist now, and you can go back and watch those if you'd like. But these were planted in November, and from seed in the house. I grew them in my house under lights, which you have to be careful about when you're growing onions because they are photosensitive. You have to make sure you're not giving them enough light in order to start the bulbing process. So I gave them just 8 hours of light a day, made sure I turned off my lights, and then I planted them outside. I want to say it was like the 1st of February. I should have planted them in January, but I just didn't get to it. So I planted them outside early February, and they have been growing ever since. It is June the 5th, I think? Yes. It is Sunday, June 5th, and oddly enough, last year I harvested onions right about the first week of June as well, and those were onions I grew from transplants that I'd purchased. But either way, I guess here in North Texas, they're ready early June. So we're going to get these pulled out of the ground. You guys are going to get to watch that, and then we're going to see how many onion bulbs we harvested. I'm not going to weigh them today because I want to weigh them once they've cured, and I can actually, because that's kind of how you buy them, and that's how they're weighed. So I'm going to weigh them once they're cured, but today you'll get to see how many bulbs I harvested, and we can see whether or not that has met the goal of growing a year's worth of onions. Alright, so time to get started. I thought my kids would want to help me, but one daughter is taking a nap. One daughter is not interested in coming out in the heat, and my son is not interested in coming out in the heat, so I'm going to harvest these myself. Alright, so here we go. Here's the first one. Okay, y'all, look at that. I can't even fit my arm all the way around it. Okay, that's already bigger than every tomato I grew last year. Every onion I grew last year. Last year, I grew quite a few onions, but they were pretty small, and I think a lot of it had to do with a lot of them bolted because we had those below zero temperatures like about 2 weeks after I planted them. They all survived, but I think it impacted them. This year we've had some optimal growing, I guess, for them because they've done well. None of them bolted, y'all. Another benefit of growing them from seed. All right, so let's get these guys harvested. I like to shake the dirt off as much as I can. Now the ones that haven't fallen over, I could leave them, but I want to go ahead and get these picked since the vast majority of them have fallen over. I want to go ahead and get them picked because I'm going to replant this bed with some field peas after I remove all these weeds. Look. Also, onions are much easier to harvest than garlic because you don't have to dig them out. You can really just pull them and they come right up. So here are the onions. I grew these, started these seeds the same time, but I put these in after the fact a few weeks later into my strawberry bed. So I think being in that seed cell too long, it stunted their growth a bit, but still worth it. So once these onions are harvested, now that the onions are harvested, my next step is to cure them. Curing them is just the process of allowing them to dry out so that the onion itself can stay for longer. And so it takes a few weeks. I'm gonna cure mine in my garage, but first I'm gonna set them outside. I have a little bench on my patio. I'm gonna set them over there for a day or two to kind of dry a little bit in the sun. I can't leave them out too long because it gets in the 90s here every day until it gets in the hundreds this weekend. So I'm gonna let them sit out there for a day or two, and then I have to move the garlic out of the garage, and so that I can put the onions where the garlic is so that these onions can cure. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks for them to cure. You leave the greens on the onions while they're curing, and the onion itself will dry, not completely obviously, but a lot of the moisture will dry out of the onion, and then the onions can last for months. Different varieties of onions last different amounts of times. The sweeter the onion, usually the less time it can last in storage. Now for me, what I did last year, I don't have a root cellar or anything like that. Basements aren't really a thing here. So I just kept them in my refrigerator. I gave them the whole one of the bottom bins, for fruits and veggies. And I just cured them, not cured them. After they were cured in a warm, open, airy place, then you have to store them somewhere. But if you want them to last long, it's better if they're at a cooler temperature than room temperature. So most articles I've read said somewhere like in the 50-degree range, which the only place I have that's that cold lower than under the 50-degree range is in my refrigerator. I don't have, like I said, I don't have a root cellar or anything like that, any other place in my house that's that cold. So that's where I stored them. And they lasted, I harvested them in June, and none of them sprouted or went bad or molded or anything in there, and they lasted through December. So they lasted just fine there, so I'll probably do the same thing, except I know for a fact I have more onions here than I did last year, so I'm not 100% sure how that'll work. I might put some of them in the fridge once they're cured and then leave some of them maybe in the pantry and just use the ones in the pantry first because they're not going to last as long. And if that doesn't work out, or if I start to see that some of them are starting to get old, then what I'm going to do is peel them and chop them up and put them in the freezer. So, and then use those for cooking and use the ones in the fridge for other purposes. So there's different ways that you can go about it. You can definitely chop up and freeze onions and they'll last, you know, forever, or slices, however you want to do it. But those onions are not going to be really good for fresh eating uses. They're going to be better for using cooked. So just keeping that in mind. But I have all these things playing out in my head so that I am able to not just, you know, growing a year's worth of onions is step one, but the other steps are making sure that those onions are able to be used for a year as well. All right, so it is done, y'all. These onions are harvested. I think I'm blocking a few, but for the most part, here they are. Let me get up a second so you can see. Here they are. So I counted them, and I had to count a few times, but the best number I've gotten is 138. 138 onions, y'all. So I think I met my goal. I'm pretty sure these are gonna last me a year, because last year I grew quite a few as well, but they just, you know, most of them were probably ping pong size or golf ball size. This year, I would say most of them are more around that tennis ball, baseball size. So I am very excited. Some of them are even bigger, like maybe close to softball size. These two, just by sight, seem to be the biggest ones. Now, just a reminder, these are 1015 Texas sweet onions. I think that's what they're called. And then these are red short burgundy. I actually bought these seeds off of Amazon in January of 2021 when I realized that the seeds that I had, the onion seeds I had, were not short day onions, so they weren't what I needed. But it was too late to plant them. After I ordered the seeds, I looked, and it was too late to plant them for last year, so I just saved them until November when I planted these. So this is just a red short day burgundy is what it said on the packet. So very excited about these. These two, like I said, by sight, they seem like the largest ones, so I just kind of cut off the grains of them so I could weigh them. This one weighed 8.5 ounces, so a little more than half a pound. And this one weighed like 6 1/3 ounces. So, and this is just me estimating looking at them. There may be some that are bigger because some of them are a little more round. Of the yellow onions are a little more round rather than flat, and I'm not very good at just visually, you know, so I could be off, but just based on my visual estimation, these are the biggest ones. But there are a lot of them around this size, so I'm very excited that, you know, it's not going to be having to use like 4 or 5 onions to make one dish. So 138 onions, I'm pretty sure that is going to last us a year, because even if I use 2 onions a week, we're good. And I did harvest, I want to say about 4 or 5 of them last week out of my strawberry bed. Now, they weren't big onions, but they still were onions. So when I'm using the small ones, I may have to use more depending on what I'm cooking. But this should last us a year, y'all. I did it. I did it. I did it. So excited. Year's worth of onions from seed. It's kind of crazy to think that back in November, you've seen onion seeds, are so tiny, the tiniest seeds. And now we have onions, something that I can take off of my grocery list. So now, for the next year, I don't have to buy garlic, and I don't have to buy onions at all. And that is the goal, right? When you're gardening, not necessarily growing a year's worth every time, but, you know, having fun, eating fresh, healthy food, and also saving. Like when you can look at, okay, I cook with onions a lot, and I'm never gonna have to like put that on my grocery list when I go grocery shopping. Same thing for garlic. Now that's something that I use all the time in my cooking, and I don't have to buy. And so next year I will definitely be doing the same thing. Now, some things that I've learned doing this process, because this is my first year growing them from seed all the way. Last year I had to grow them from starts because I didn't have the right seed, so that was the lesson I learned last year. The other lesson I learned from last year's growing season was about fertilization and how much nitrogen onions need when they're in that green growing phase. So this year I definitely stepped that up and paid attention and gave my onions special attention when it comes to fertilization. That was something I did this season that I didn't do last year that definitely helped my results, I believe. But another thing I learned is that for the next season, I'm going to start them about a month earlier. These I started in mid-November. I want to say mid-November, yeah. And next season, I'm going to start them early October. And the reason why is that the yellow, the 1015, they're named that because that's the date you should be planting the seeds. So I'm going to start mine early October, maybe even late September. But I'm thinking early October would work. And then I'm going to get them out into the garden either mid to late December or very early January. Whereas I didn't get these out into the garden until the very first week of February. And so that'll give them more time in the ground because our winters are pretty mild here. And if we're gonna get, like, our worst weather generally comes in January and February as far as cold. So putting them out in December, they'll be more established when that really cold weather comes. But my last season onions, like, onions can take cold. The onions I grew last season, they survived when we got below 0 here and that crazy deep freeze we had. They survived. They were heavily mulched, but I didn't cover them other than that, and those onions survived and produced. So I'm going to get them a little more time because the longer they have, y'all, my glasses keep slipping because I'm so sweaty, but the longer they have in the ground before the day length gets to the point where they start bulbing till we get to those 10 to 12 hour days, then the more vegetative growth is the more layers that you're going to get on your onion. So I'm going to try to expand that a little bit. So this time I got these onions out into the garden when the seedlings were, I want to say, like 10 weeks old. And so this season I may do about the same time, but actually I want my seedlings to be a little bit bigger, a little stronger, because when I first planted them out, I did lose some. Like, some of the seedlings just didn't catch and they fell over. And fortunately I had some extras that I was able to replace them with. But those kind of put me behind a little bit. So when I planted my starts last year, the plants I had, most of them took. So, and they were a lot bigger plants. So I want them to have a little bit more time to grow indoors before I put them out. So I'm going to start them early enough for that. And I want to put them out earlier so they have just a longer vegetative growth. So I said the end of October, early October, but I may start like end of September so they can get October, November, and December to grow indoors 3 whole months, like 12 weeks, and then put them outside early January. The other thing I'm going to do differently, aside from extending their growing time, is I'm going to also grow them in something different. Last season I grew, or this season I grew them, let me see, I have actually one right here. Last season, y'all, I'm a mess. Last season, I started my onions in this size seed starting tray. So this is what, like 2 inches, maybe 1.5 inches deep, 1 inch square around. And I just put as many seeds as possible in each one because I know onions can grow like that. And obviously they can, they did. And they were in these trays for like 10 weeks or so before I planted them outside. So this tray, it did the job, but I think I could do better because the plants where I ended up with just a few seedlings in each one, they definitely were bigger and like healthier looking, as in just more robust, wider, thicker seedlings than the ones where I had a whole bunch all jammed together. So I am going to grow them a little differently. What I'm planning to do is get some like loaf pans, maybe some like not the large ones and not the really small ones, but the ones in between, and which are deeper, maybe about 2-3 inches deep. And I'm going to put just like 25 in each pan so I can space the seedlings a little better, and I'll thin them a little so that I know that I have adequate space and each seedling has more space to deep, and wide to grow, so that each seedling has a little bit more space to grow so that they can grow a little bigger, a little fatter, a little healthier, especially because I'm going to grow them a little longer. So that's my plan. It may change, who knows what I find. I might find a container I like even better, but right now I'm thinking like foil loaf pans for them so I can give them a little more space. But yeah, so those are the things I'm going to do differently mainly, is just starting them sooner, getting them out into the garden sooner so they have a whole much longer growing time, and giving them more space to grow as seedlings so that they don't end up being stunted, and so that if I do have some that don't take, the seedlings aren't so ready to be put outside because they're so cramped in their containers that they'll still grow to a nice decent size. So that's my plan for next season, to get onions so that all of them end up this size and or even bigger, depending. I'm planning to grow this 10-15 again, and then I think for the white onion, I think I picked a Carta Blanca or something, and then for red I chose a red Creole onion. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed getting to see these onions harvested, and of course if you did, please go ahead and click that like button and subscribe to my channel for more gardening content. There's lots of videos that I've already created and much more coming this season. So go ahead and subscribe and click that bell notification so that you never miss a video. And until we meet again, have a great one. Bye.